Hey guys, it's me, producer Ross, and welcome to another edition of my ITFC. And today I'm honoured to be joined by good old Tony. How you doing, my friend, during this weird situation we've been going through?
I'm all right, thanks, Roscoe. Well, I was born in Ipswich, although I've never lived in Ipswich. I lived in Stowmarket for a bit, and a couple of other places, but I never lived in Ipswich. But I was born there, and I was born a long time ago. I'm quite old, so I was born in '73. So as I was a kid, I was growing up in the glory days of Bobby Robson. My dad is actually a West Ham fan. Most of my family are from the East End of London and West Ham fans. But West Ham were pretty crap. They were back in the second division back then, and Ipswich were really good. And my dad used to work at ICI in Stowmarket, and every time he went in on a Monday morning, he used to say there was a massive queue of Ipswich fans waiting to take the piss out of him about Ipswich winning and West Ham usually losing. So he thought he'd encourage me to support the local team and, of course, a successful team. So yeah, I was brought up as an Ipswich fan. And then, ironically, when I was about 11, I moved back to London, East End London. So just as Ipswich were getting a bit crap again, I started living in the heartland of West Ham, Arsenal and Tottenham supporters. So it kind of backfired, really, my dad's plan. But once you got your team, you're stuck for life, aren't you? Well, funnily enough, my first ever town game, because as I say, we lived in Stowmarket. So the first town game I ever went to was a friendly at Stowmarket's old ground. It was a testimonial, Stowmarket versus an Ipswich 11. I think it was they fielded a really strong, it was 1980, and I think they fielded a really strong team, and Ipswich won 15-0. They didn't go easy on Stowmarket. So the first match I ever saw, we won 15-0, and it's been downhill ever since, really, because we've never repeated that winning margin.
Definitely. And can you remember your first competitive game or league game or anything like that at Portman Road?
Well, first competitive game, I don't really remember which team it would have been. I remember quite a few games from around about 82, 83. My dad was a bit funny because obviously it was the 80s was a time of crowd trouble and stuff. So my dad didn't really take me to any of the big games. So it tended to be games against Southampton and fairly Coventry or whatever, fairly nondescript teams. I never got to see the sort of big matches. But yeah, no, I remember seeing games against Notts County and, as I say, Southampton and I think Oxford, people like that, Luton. Just sort of just at I kind of missed the UEFA Cup winning team really and that. So just sort of about 82, 83, 84 was when I sort of saw them just as the team were kind of starting to slide a little bit. Obviously, you have quite a lot of favourites, really. But I mean, for some reason, when I was a little kid, I was obsessed with goalkeepers. So Paul Cooper was my absolute hero, Cooper man, saving all the penalties and everything, and I loved him. And then the two Dutchmen and Franz Tyson, Arne Muir. But to be honest, if I had to pick my favourite ever player of all time, is probably Marcus Stewart. So the dog loves Marcus Stewart as well.
Yeah,
Just have to say it.
Yeah.
And Marcus Stewart, I loved him because several reasons. I mean, he was fantastic. He came in obviously to that team, and that the Ipswich team, obviously at that point kept getting into the playoffs, but didn't quite do enough to just push through to get into the Premier League. And then he was bought that season and scored obviously some really vital goals against Bolton in the playoff semi-final. And he was a missing piece, I think, that just pushed us over the edge to get into the Premier League. And I loved him as well because he was left-footed and a striker, which is where I used to play. When I used to play football, I'm very left-footed, and I used to play up front. And I like to think I scored some goals like Marcus Stewart, but I don't think I ever scored those goals because he scored about 3 or 4 of those goals where he ran round the opposition about 3 or 4 times, didn't he, before rounding the keeper and slotting them in. So no, he was probably my favourite. For some reason I loved Herman Hreidarsson as well. Not quite sure why. He was a bit of a big lump, wasn't he? But occasionally he'd show some amazing skill. I remember him doing a Cruyff turn one time, and the crowd going a bit crazy because he was the least expected person to do that sort of bit of skill.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, they've probably been my favourites. But Marcus Stewart, yeah, definitely. not really much of a surprise, but it's Bobby Robson has just grown up. And even though I perhaps didn't see many of the games, he was just the hero. I mean, George Burley as well. It's fantastic. But yeah, it's Bobby Robson, really. He was an absolute hero of mine. And when I was living in Stowmarket, his brother actually owned the news agency at Coombsford in Stowmarket. And when Bobby Robson brought out probably his first autobiography, because I think he had several, but he brought out his autobiography, and they were selling it in the newsagent there, and Bobby Robson actually went down and did a signing. So I got to meet him. It was the only time I really ever got to speak to him or meet him, and I was just, I don't know, I would have been about 7 or 8, and I was just completely awestruck. I couldn't even speak to him, really. Just got my book signed, and that was it. So yeah, Bobby Robson, really. And I think it's wonderful. I don't know if you saw, there was a documentary film made a year or two ago, a couple of years ago, More Than a Manager. Yeah. And I went to the screening that they did at Portman Road, and it was just amazing. And to see how well regarded he is, not just by Ipswich fans, but by Newcastle. Every team he managed, really, the fans loved him, and teams that he didn't manage, I think, respected him, which is quite unusual in a manager, isn't it? When you think of like Alex Ferguson, Jose Mourinho, it's hard to be successful and be popular across the board. But I think I've never heard anyone have a bad word to say about Bobby Robson, really. I think he was a great football manager and an absolute gent. I'll be honest with you, I struggled with this one because there's been some absolute crackers I've been to. But I mean, that season we got back into the Premier League. I remember seeing the game. It's funny because we didn't even win the game, but the game we played at home against Manchester United, we took the lead. Fabian Wilness, I think, scored, and I think Beckham maybe scored a free kick to equalise. But we were playing the Manchester United team, and I think the midfield, if I remember rightly, Manchester United's midfield that day was Keane, Scholes, Beckham, and Giggs. So I mean, I don't know if there's been a better midfield in the Premier League history, really, and yet we battered them, really. And Jim Magilton was actually the man of the match. Jim Magilton was the man that was pulling the strings and the best midfielder on the day. And I think the fact that we took the lead and, okay, they equalised, so we only got the draw. But I think that was when Town fans thought, no, we can make a go at this. We're not just going to be cannon fodder for the big teams. We can actually have a decent season here. And the atmosphere that day as well. I think Alex Ferguson even commented that, although, because Portman Road was having a lot of renovations, so I think the capacity was only about 20,000 or so, 25,000 tops. But he said that it sounded like 70, 80,000 people. Because Ipswich fans can sometimes be a bit quiet. We've got a bit of a reputation of being a bit reserved sometimes, but the atmosphere that day was absolutely superb. So that's probably one of my favourites. The other one is the following season when we played Inter Milan at home in the UEFA Cup. And I was lucky enough to be there as well. And again, like, I know Inter weren't perhaps playing their strongest side, but we battered them, and how it only finished 1-0, I'll never really know. But that was the atmosphere that night. There's something magical about a midweek game under the floodlights as well. It was just really cracking atmosphere. So they're two that do really stick in my mind.
And then the next question is your favourite Town goal. Once again, there's been loads of goals during the years. Would you say Alan Armstrong header against Inter Milan is up there?
Yeah, that is up there. That is up there. Every now and again I'll rewatch that on YouTube. Yeah. Just remember that. It's funny enough, when I was sat, I can't remember where my ticket was for that game. I think it was up in like what was called the Pioneer Stand, and for some reason I was on the edge of the Ipswich fans, and I don't know if they were Inter fans, but I was certainly sat quite near a load of Italian, whether they were dignitaries or something, or people from the club. And when Alan Armstrong's goal went in, I went absolutely berserk, and I scared the hell out of this Italian woman that was sat about 2 seats away from me. She didn't know what the hell had happened. So yeah, that's up there. Although I think my favourite ever goal was from the season. Was Finidi George in his chipped goal against Sunderland. Because we won 5-0. I mean, it wasn't a great season because obviously we went down at the end of that season, but we beat Sunderland and perfectly. I was pretty much perfectly in line with where it went in. So when he chipped the keeper, and it went into that corner. I was just behind that kind of corner, so I saw it leave his foot. And as soon as he left his foot, he thought, well, that's going in. And it was just a beautiful team goal as well, because it was a quick breakaway, wasn't it? There was a couple of passes, 1-2. Finidi George ran onto it and just first time chipped it over Sorensen. And yeah, in my mind's eye, I can still see from behind the goal now as it lofted over and went into that corner. So that's probably my favourite one I've seen live. It's just a beautiful goal.
We'll get into your favourite Town kit. Can you remember your first one that you got?
Oh, the first kit I ever had was a dodgy knockoff of the Pioneer pinstripe. Because I don't know whether you couldn't really buy them, the proper ones, or whether they were just too expensive. But I remember my dad managed to pick up, and like I look back on it now, and it was really cheap and horrible. I don't know what it was made out of. It was made out of like asbestos or some horrible plastic that would have gone up. Not asbestos because that doesn't burn, but this plastic that I would have gone up like a Roman candle if anyone come near me with a lighter. But yeah, and it felt nasty. I don't think it looked that great, and it had Pioneer written across it, but the letters peeled off the first time it was washed. But I absolutely loved it. I loved that. That was my favorite. That's probably my favorite. I like the one they've got now actually, which is kind of a bit of a tribute to it. I'm not sure about the blue shorts wearing those, but yeah, it's quite a nice kit. We've had some lovely kits, haven't we? We had some really nice. We've had some absolute shockers as well.
Yeah.
Like the what was the blue one that kind of faded into white, which I actually had, and I wore quite a lot. But it was, looking back, it wasn't. I don't think it was a great kit.
I know some people like it. I think some people
that's the thing, isn't it, with kits? I mean, I look at a lot of the modern kits and think I want to watch the Premier League teams now. I think most of their kits look absolutely bloody awful, but some people like them and obviously buy them. But yeah,
really, aren't they?
I think the UEFA Cup winning kit. Whether it's hard, isn't it? Because do I love that kit because we won the UEFA Cup in it? Or do I love the kit because it was a great kit? I think it's a bit of both, really. But yeah, that's probably my all-time favourite.
Before we move on to the next question, I just want to quickly make you move just a tad to see what's behind you. Of course, you've got a little green. Yeah. There you are.
That's me. I think it was 2006 or 2007.
I think so, yeah.
I bought the kit and was it when I realised I'd gone round to the club shop to buy the shirt, and I realised that the ground was all kind of open, so I just wandered through. And I met I don't know if you remember, we had a groundsman called Alan Ferguson.
Yeah.
And he won loads of awards. Such a good pitch back in those days. I don't know how it stands up nowadays, but and he was there marking the lines, and I just asked if I could have my photo taken there with the shirt on. So he took some photos of me. So
there you go. Before we finish this video, I'd like to end this video on a high note. So we're going to go into your worst moment as a Town fan. And of course, I've had a few of those in the last few years, but have you got a personal one for yourself?
There's quite a few, isn't there? I mean, any time we get beat by Norwich is pretty bad. I remember going back. I remember as a kid being absolutely distraught when we got relegated in '86, because to me, Ipswich were a team that challenged for the title. So it seemed inconceivable that we could get relegated. And I remember that. I seem to remember. I hope I remember this right. But we'd for some reason we'd finished all our games, and Oxford, who we were competing with to stay in the league to not get relegated, they still had one game to play, I think, and it was against Arsenal. And if they lost, I think we stayed up, maybe even if they drew. And I just remember thinking, oh well, that's all right. Arsenal are a decent team. I mean, they weren't the greatest then, but they were a decent upper mid-table side. And I thought, well, Oxford won't win that game. It's fine, we'll stay up. And then the result came through, and Oxford had won, and we went down. I was absolutely devastated. As you are when you're a little kid. What would I have been, 13 then? Yeah, 13. So that just was devastating. Bit more recently, the playoff final was actually a bit of a devastating one for me, because I couldn't get a ticket, and I was outside Wembley and I couldn't get in. Wow. I did actually manage to blag my way into Wembley with about 10 minutes to kick off, and I was stood in the tunnel standing next to Bluey, the mascot, and I didn't really know what to do, because I thought, I'm in now, but I don't have a seat, because I haven't got a ticket. So what do I do? So I kind of wandered around a bit, tried to look like I was supposed to be there, and unfortunately a security guard asked me if I had a ticket, and I got escorted out with about 5 minutes to kick off. So yeah, I had to listen to there was quite a lot of Town fans that obviously couldn't get tickets, so we were all sat outside on the steps of old Wembley, listening to the radio, listening to the match, and it was simultaneously fantastic because obviously Ipswich won, but it was also so depressing to be. The party was going on right next door, but I couldn't get in to be part of it. Although, luckily, the turnstile operators did take pity on us and they let a load of us in with about 5 minutes to go. So I did see the last 5 minutes. But even that kind of felt a bit cheap because it kind of felt like I was just gate crashing a party that I hadn't really been invited to.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a bittersweet memory of the playoff final.
That's a unique story. That.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't know. I think as you get older, you get a bit more used to disappointment. So all the disappointments recently, even when we got relegated from the Championship, haven't really stung as much as when I was younger. When I was younger, every result we lost would like if you lost on the Saturday afternoon, it would ruin your week, the whole week. Whereas now, I kind of like, oh, we've lost. I might be a bit upset for a quarter of an hour or so afterwards, but then you get on with it. My favourite memories, really, I suppose, are of like because I missed obviously the European games under Bobby Robson when I was younger. So when we qualified for the UEFA Cup, 2001, I was kind of determined to get to an away one, and I couldn't go to the Torpedo Moscow game, so I was praying that we got through that round so I could go to the next one. And then I went away to the Helsingborg game, and that was probably one of my favourite experiences because we went on one of the organised trips, and it was just a couple of days, and we stayed. Funny enough, we stayed in Copenhagen, which is obviously in the wrong country, but there's a bridge that goes across from Copenhagen across to Malmo. Malmo, yeah, and then we got a coach round to Helsingborg. So that was 2 days of just absolute partying, and we won the match, and that was just fantastic. So that's probably my favourite experience, my happiest following Town. I went to the San Siro as well for the Inter Milan game, which was fantastic, but it was a bit disappointing because we took 10,000 fans, I think, but there was only about 10,000 Inter fans there because they weren't really interested. So it was about a quarter full of San Siro, so I was a bit disappointed that sort of 70,000, 80,000 people in there would have been amazing.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, probably Helsingborg away. It's my happiest memory of following Town.
Cool. Well, Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure. You got anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, not really. I don't think. I hope everyone's staying well, and watching football is all a bit weird at the moment, isn't it, without the crowds and stuff. But hopefully we can get back to going along to matches soon.